Hello, everybody. Thanks very much for joining my talk. My name is Daniel Baade, and I'm the founder and chairman of a company called Art World Insights. We are based in London, and we use machine learning to predict the value of fine art. Before I start with my actual presentation, let me give you a little bit of background about myself, because it explains kind of the angle which we look at the topic. So I used to be an academic, made my PhD quite early, focusing on forecasting, then worked many years in finance, and then I was hired by Christie's, which is the biggest art company on the planet, to do forecasting for their global auctions. And then I worked for them as head of strategy for many years, and left them 2 years ago to do a couple of startups. Right, can you use machine learning to predict the value of fine art? Well, when we talk about value, why are we actually talking about value? I mean, why are we not just talking about pictures that we like? Like this one, for example. That's a very nice painting. I like this one. I would like to have this one, but there's a big problem. Or actually, there are 947,250 problems. Art is very, very expensive, and that's the equivalent of basically, what is that? That's 10 Porsche. That's a very nice house in London. That's the lifetime earning of an average person. So when you talk about art, in particular fine art, you have these kind of numbers flying around. So it's very, very important to understand the value. So, and that's why it's actually a topic of global importance, because they're not just the art collectors who care about the value. There are the family offices who invest in art, the wealth managers, insurance companies. The taxman is very, very keen to know about the value of art. Auction platforms and so on, auction houses, museums, trusts, governments, and so on, and so on, and so on. It's really global questions, and all of these will tell you they like art because it's beautiful, and they're all right. They will all tell you they like art because of its cultural value, and they're all right. But there's always this dollar sign in the background. So, a quick question to you guys. Do you guys think valuing art is easy or difficult? So quick show of hands, who thinks valuing art is easy? Okay, that's about 1% in the room. Who thinks it's hard? Quick show of hands. Okay, that's about 99%. Okay, that actually shows you something. Let's go back to our painting that I showed you a minute ago. And let's see if we can get some indications why this one sold for so much money. Well, what do we know about the painting? It was painted by a chap called Alex Katz, who's still around. It's an American artist. It's an oil painting. It's quite large, 180 times 244, and it's 30 years old. Another indicator is that it was sold at Christie's, which is a top auction house. So, yeah, so there's some indicators that's very expensive, but it could be anything, basically. So when you sell a painting or when you buy a painting at an auction, what the auction houses do is, before the auction, actually, they analyze the painting and they give you a valuation. And they take about 4 weeks to do this. And these are the best valuers in the world. And here's what the best valuers in the world thought literally just 3 weeks before the auction about the value of this painting. 450 to 550,000 pounds. So they were basically off by about 100% within just a few weeks' time, which is actually shocking. So why is it so hard to determine the value of an artwork? I mean, if you compare it with other, let's say, asset classes, right? I mean, very often you start with, okay, how much does it actually cost to produce, right? I mean, if you want to price an iPhone, for example, you think about the cost for the battery and all the other kind of stuff that is in an iPhone. But for a painting, I mean, there's a bit of color, a canvas, call it $100, right? It's basically nothing. So you can't use that approach to value a painting. The next very, very popular approach in valuation is something called DCF modeling, so discounted cash flows. So what many investors do in other asset classes like stocks, bonds, and properties and so on is they ask the question, so how much money will this investment give me back in the next few years? And is this kind of return bigger than my outlay right now? And if it is, then they invest. If it isn't, they don't invest. But as you probably know, art has no cash flow. In fact, you can't really do anything with art except for looking at it, right? And that's a big problem, because another approach to value something would be, okay, what can you actually do with it? When you have a car, for example. I mean, a car, you can have a negative cash flow, but you can use it to drive around. You can go to work, or you can visit your friends. But with art, you can't do anything. On top of this, art is a very, very complex market. And technically speaking, there is nothing like an art market. Because the art market is, in the end, a collection of many small markets. In the end, you cannot compare paintings from Picasso to, let's say, Andy Warhol or Alex Katz earlier, because they're very, very different. And they're very, very different buyers. And you cannot compare a very, very large painting from Picasso to a small painting from Picasso. They're very, very different buyers. So technically speaking, every artist and every painting, every object is a single art market. And as you can already imagine, if every painting is one market, there's almost no liquidity in the market. And you have very, very little data points. And I will show you in a second an example, a real-life example. Does anyone know this painting? Anyone seen this before? Quick show of hands. Okay, quite a few actually, it's good. That's a painting called Salvator Mundi, painted by Leonardo da Vinci. And I guess why the people who just raised their hands heard about this painting. This is the most expensive painting on this planet. And here's a bit of history. The painting was commissioned by King Louis XII of France about 500 years ago. Was then given to King Charles I of England a little bit later and was lost. Then in 1958, it reappeared at an auction at Sotheby's in London, and it was sold for $60. Remember that number. Then we moved from London actually to the US, and it was sold at an estate auction. And it was bought by 3 art dealers for $10,000. Right? Still, the numbers are very, very small. Then just 8 years later, these 3 art dealers sold it to a very notorious art market expert called Yves Bouvier in a private sale at Sotheby's for $80 million. Now we're talking, huh? He then sold the painting immediately, literally within days or weeks, to a Russian oligarch for $127.5 million. Right? This Russian oligarch figured out that Yves Bouvier just paid $80 million just 3 weeks earlier and sued him because he thought he overpaid. But no one knew how much the painting should be worth exactly. So this gentleman decided to put a painting in an auction, again at Christie's, in November 2017, and it was sold for $450 million. Right? And just before the auctions, as you know now, there are kind of these estimates from the experts, right? They didn't publish it, but if you had asked them, they told you it will sell for around 100 million. And the very, very best in the world were off by $350 million. Shocking, huh? Let me now start at some numbers, right? And this again for the same painting. So we talked about in 1958, sold for $60. Then for $10,000, and the compounded annual growth rate was 12%, which is basically in line with the stock market, so nothing really, really special. Then the sale for $80 million, compounded annual growth rate of 207%, a massive, massive return, 59%, and then 37% when it came into the auction. And all we know about this painting, the most expensive painting on this planet, we have 5 data points over a period of 59 years. Actually, just 3 of them are public. The only reason why we know these 2 is because of the lawsuit, right? With a compounded annual growth rate of 31% and a total growth rate of 750 million %, right? And if you would now apply kind of time series analysis to this and basically extrapolate this into the future, you see some funny results, because in 2043, the value of this single painting will be equivalent to the GDP of all of Poland, 13 years later, all of Europe, and just 6 years later, this one single painting would be worth all the production of the whole world. And this shows you that kind of time series is a very, very bad method actually in art market forecasting. Right. So what's the current state of the art? I've already kind of indicated it a little bit. So first of all, art valuation is 100% manual at the moment. If you have a painting, it doesn't need to be $1 million painting, can be just a few thousand if you like, and you want to value it, you want to bring it to an auction house, ideally a top auction house. And they then take it for about 3 to 4 weeks. They first of all look at it and kind of see if it's an original, or if it's a fake, the conditions and stuff like that. And then they check some facts. They check kind of who painted it, what do we know about the artist, where did the artist exhibit in the past, who else collects them, stuff like that, right? And after 4 weeks, they come back to you and they give you a valuation. And as you already know, they give you a valuation range. And the average spread between the low and high estimate that they give you last year at Sotheby's was 37.2%. It's quite big, huh? If you, for example, want to value a house and someone says, oh, it could be $1 million or 1.4 million, it's not very accurate. And the question is, so they give you these valuations, and how many of the objects that they actually value are actually sold within this valuation? 60%, right? And these are the very, very best art valuers in the world. And that's where we come in. We basically automate everything that a professional art valuer does. And I've worked with these guys for many, many years, and I'm simplifying here a little bit, but in the end, they look at 45 different things. And you can put these 45 different things into 3 main groups. Stuff that is linked to the artist, to the actual object, so the painting or sculpture, or to the market. So stuff like how popular is the artist on social media is nowadays a very important question. It's something that you can measure. Which museums collect the artist? Stuff that you can measure. Where was the painting exhibited? Stuff that you can measure. If you talk about the upcoming artists, did they go to a good art school or not? Stuff that you can measure. Where the artist comes from is a very, very important factor for the value of art. Because if you have 2 artists which are literally the same, they do the same stuff, but let's say one comes from, let's say, Denmark, and the other one comes from, let's say, from the US, the Danish artist would sell at a discount, and the American artist would sell at a premium. It's just the way it is, right? And then similar stuff for the object, starting with very, very obvious things like, what material is it? Is it like an oil painting or a drawing, or what is it, right? How big is it? Conditions, stuff like that. And the market is a bit more complicated, but imagine factors that kind of you can use to estimate supply and demand. And in the end, there's basically an equation with, imagine 45 different terms, basically expressing each one of those plus a few more. So what we effectively do is we take a very, very complex problem, a problem that humans haven't solved for many, many years, and we separate this one problem into many, many small problems, actually 45. And these 45 small problems are much, much easier to solve than this one big problem. So we do decomposition. And that allows us to kind of make the whole things much less complex. It's much easier to find patterns, and you can use it to predict much more accurately. And it's quite funny, actually, because I have a friend, he's a bit older than I am, so he has a son that is 21 or 22, and the son studies art at Newcastle University, and the friend came to me and said, hey, Daniel, can you have a chat with my son? Because he's kind of very, very talented, but I'm afraid that he doesn't make any money as an artist afterwards. So I had a chat with him and told him, actually based on data, what he should do if he wants to be successful in the art world. So it was quite useful, actually. But apart from that, you can use this method basically to help the people that I mentioned earlier, the wealth managers, auction houses, and so on, to actually do more on the art valuation stuff. But you can also kind of see it from a different point of view. So there are 45 factors. Imagine them as 45 different points, right? And the model works in a certain way where, imagine we would like to draw shapes. like triangles or squares or circles or stuff. But we can't. We can only kind of have dots around. And what the model allows us is basically to estimate each single dot. When you then plot them, basically, you actually see the shape. You see, is it a triangle? Is it a circle? Or what is it? And it's quite powerful. It's actually very, very powerful. Right. So what's the current score in the game man versus machine? Here's the man. So art valuation has been around for almost 250 years. Christie started in December 1766, so a bit more than 50 years. They have spreads of 37%, as you already know, and a hit rate of just 60%. Machine learning and art valuation, so I think we are the only company that actually does it worldwide, has been doing this for about 250 days, right? For obvious reasons, we go for a very, very similar spread, for obvious reasons. And we have currently a hit rate of 57%, which is a little bit below that, and so we are not exactly there. But this is hiding one fact, because the professional art valuers, they only look at this very, very expensive stuff, the stuff that I showed you earlier, the $400 million paintings or the $1 million paintings and stuff. They will not focus on the primary market. So when you are an artist right now, they will not focus on that because it's way too hard for them. We, with our model, actually focus exactly on that. We focus on the very, very hard part, and we are almost there. Right, and I think that's basically the end of my talk already. Yeah, so we are early stage, so please feel free to follow us on Instagram. We have quite a good Instagram feed. Go to our website, or if you have any questions, kind of send me an email, or I will be around for questions later on. And by the way, we are hiring, so if anyone's interested in kind of doing stuff in the art world, get in touch with me. Thank you very much.